CSIS 2470 is filmed before a live studio audience.
Hey everybody, welcome to class today. Today we're going to be doing a very broad overview of something that's very important to web developers, and that is the Web Browser Developer Toolkit. But let me start off by saying this lecture is not intended to be a deep dive on any specific tool in the toolbox. It's meant to show you a brief overview of a few of the important tools in the toolkit. The intention is just to make you aware of their existence along with kind of what they're for. Then you on your own are going to have to go down the rabbit hole to find out more about it, because each one of these tools could have its own entire course, right? Some of these tools are just no way to cover the depth in 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 videos. There's just too much depth. But you wouldn't even know what rabbit hole to go down if you don't know these tools exist. So once you know that the tool exists, then you can go do your own deep dive. Search for tutorials on YouTube, ask ChatGPT to help you out and walk you through it. Look at the developer tools documentation, which I've linked to in the lecture notes. And I've linked to the one for Chromium-based browsers, for Firefox, Safari, and all the major ones that you might be using. And so this whole thing is more about pointing out to you the fact that hammers and screwdrivers exist, and less about explaining to you what do you do with hammers and screwdrivers, right? I'll give you a brief little teeny, here's a couple things you can do with a hammer, and here's a couple things you can do with a screwdriver. But the depth of using the tool is going to have to come on your own time, because as I said, each one of these could have its own entire course, right? So we're not even going to cover all the tools, but I'm going to point you in the right direction so you can see where they are and so you can get familiar with them and have a little bit more of an overview of the Browser Developer Toolkit. So we're going to do this by just looking at some code examples and seeing what happens in the browser in the toolkit. So there ain't nothing to it but to do it to the code. What we have right here is from a previous lecture where we made that little sticky note application. So I've got it opened up in the browser here. And if we right click on the green area here and go to inspect, that's how you get to your toolkit. Now we've been in here before. We know all about the elements tab right here, where we can see the entire DOM model of what was delivered to the browser. And then if we click on, the H1, for example, we can see all of its properties down here, the DOM stuff that we have access to. We know all about that. We use that quite a bit. That's been the whole main thing we do in this course, right? We also know about the console, right? We use this quite a bit, and we can type JavaScript code right here directly. And so I'm not going to spend any time on those two. We know about console.log and console.error and all that stuff. The one we're going to look at is the application tab, and it may be showing here with these, or you may have to click on this little arrow thing to get it, but there it is, the application tab right there. Now, what this is, it shows all kinds of stuff in here. We're only going to briefly talk about local storage, and that's why we got this sticky note app here. If you'll recall, whenever we type a name here, then save it, it ends up in local storage. So if I type my username Beavis and I click save, you can see that the sticky note shows up just like we learned when we built this in a previous lecture. But also look over here on the right, and you can see now under local storage, there is the username key and the value Beavis. And if we go back and look at our code here, that's what we called it when we set it down here. Right here on line 21, we said set item username equal to name.value, which is what we got out of the form. And so that's where we get this key here. That's the key that's showing up right there. And then the name is what we typed into the form. And then the other thing you'll recall, if we look at the code again, we had another thing called user nodes. That happened whenever they lifted up their finger off of the keyboard. So the moment I type something here, you'll see it appear right here on the right hand side under the user nodes key. And so I'll say get dry cleaning. And you can see as I typed it, it also typed over there on the right at the same time. If I delete part of it on the sticky note, you'll see it also deletes it out of the local storage. And that stays there. So let's put that back, dry cleaning. And remember, when I refresh the page, that stays. I just refreshed the page and that's still there, right? If I copy that, close the page and reopen it completely, paste it in there, The data is still showing, obviously, but if I go inspect and I look inside of the application area and look at the local storage there, you can see that the data is still there in local storage. Now, as you're looking here, you can see there is a session storage. What is a session? That's something we don't even cover in this class, right? There are cookies. I'm sure we all know what cookies are, but we don't really talk much about them in this class, how to set them or any of that stuff. That's not part of this curriculum. And there's browser, cache, and a whole bunch of other stuff here. And again, you could have an entire mini course on just the stuff on this tab. All you're getting is the fact that the tab exists, and now you can see kind of the things that are in there. And now it's up to you to go down your own rabbit hole to find what all this stuff does, how to interact with it, how to use it. All right, so that's it for the application tab. Now you know where to find your local storage. Next up, we're going to talk about debugging. Now, we know how to debug our code. We've done it where we go into our code and we comment the lines out, or we console stuff out, or we remove some dynamic stuff and we just hard code things just to test things. We've done all that kind of stuff before, but there are full-blown professional debuggers out there in the wild, and there's one built into your browser. Now, depending on how huge your application is or how tiny it is, you may or may not need it. And how to use a debugger, as I mentioned with all these tabs we're going to look at today, it could be its own course, right? It's a lot. All right, I'll just say that it's a lot. But let's just do some simple things to kind of show you, first of all, where to find it and a couple basic principles about using a debugger. So where you find it is under the Sources tab here. If you look under the Sources tab, you can see the code here. I'm going to scooch this over a little bit and make a little bit of room there. Okay, so right now I'm in the index file. I've clicked on the index file, and you can see it all right here. And then if I want to look at a JavaScript file, I can just look at my folder structure. It's all there. And here's the JavaScript file, right? It's this file right here, right? The one that we've been doing for this little sticky note app. Now, it's a little weird to try to contrive a bug, so I'm not really going to do that, but I am just going to show you a couple of features that are useful when using a debugger. So what you can do is make breakpoints, okay? And there's a couple ways to do it. I'm going to show you one right here in this tool. So remember, we clicked on Sources, then we get into the code file we're interested in. And then if you hover over the numbers here and you click on one of these, it'll put a little blue flag there. And now if you reload the page, the code will stop right there on line 6. It'll run line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it'll stop on line 6. So if I refresh, and you can see that paused in debugger, and it's on line 6 right now. Now, we're going to look at some things that you can look for while you've paused your code. We'll get to that in a minute. But for the moment, there's a couple things I can do. If I want, I can click this little button right here, and that will just go to the next line. So if I just go here, that just goes to the next line, and then the next line, and it just keeps going down and down to the next line. If I turn this off, I'm going to undo that, and let's refresh the page here so we won't be in debugger mode. We already have stored local storage stuff here, right? So Beavis is captured, and so the username, remember, let's look in the application tab. Username exists, right? And it's right there, Beavis. Okay, so let's go back to Sources here. I'm going to put that stop point right here on line 6 just for fun. Refresh. Now notice when we get to this point, only welcome is being displayed on our page because we haven't done anything yet. And the reason welcome is being displayed is because that's the H1 from the HTML. We haven't run any JavaScript because JavaScript is what determines what the rest of the page looks like. Well, we haven't run any JavaScript because all we've done is set up all these variables here on line 1 through 6, and then we paused our code, right? If I click this next button right here, now I go to line 7 and I grab the form, right? But here's where something's going to happen. If I click on the next thing, it's going to drop down to line 9, and it's going to see if username exists. Well, we know that it exists, right? So if I click this thing next, what's it going to do? It's going to go down to line 11. And what does line 11 do? It sets the inner text to something, and then we click this, and now you can see that line 11 kicked in, and then line 12 is saying to set that to display block, so it doesn't run until I click the button here, and now it ran it and it showed the sticky note, which is button.style.display equals block. That's what makes the note display. And the reason it's doing that is because that if statement on line 9 was true. Now we're going to click it again. It's going to jump down to line 14. And that's what the reset button showed up after we got past line 13. Now that we're on 14, when we get off of it, it's going to display the note. And there it did. It displayed the note. And then the last thing it's going to do once we click off of here, it's going to give focus to the note, right? And now notice here, the else statement completely got skipped, right? And the code jumped all the way down to line 30. And what did it do? It added the event listener, right? And we can keep stepping through the code. I don't think we necessarily need to do that. Actually, let's just do that. We're going to create the event listener. So now the event listener for note is done. And now on line 34, we're about to create the event listener for the reset button right there, right? And then I click next, and now it's down to the bottom and we're done, okay? So we step through each line one at a time. Well, what I didn't show you is there are certain things you can look for while you're stepping through it. But if we had a bug in our code here, you can see how this can be useful to stop and look at the line of code and see what's happening on the screen on your left, and then look at some things that we're going to see over here on the right. So we're going to come back to the things on the right in just a minute. Now, before you reload the page, make sure you take that little breakpoint off right there by clicking on that again, and then I can reload the page and it'll be normal, okay? I'm going to put that one more time. I'll just do it on line 7 here. Refresh, and then it says debugger pause. A minute ago, we were just stepping through each thing one at a time. Well, I can just push play, and if I do that, it'll just resume the rest of the code, right? Unless I had another breakpoint maybe. So I have 2 breakpoints here. So refresh, and it paused on line 7. I click this, and now it paused again on line 30, all right? So you can put breakpoints wherever you want. Let's go ahead and stop and get rid of the breakpoints, refresh and reload it. Before we talk about that little panel on the right, let's remember what's going on here. We have 3 kind of panels here underneath sources. We have the files that we're going to be debugging. We have the actual code in those files where I can put breakpoints wherever I want. So stop on all these places here, and then we can stop and analyze things. And notice while I'm clicking all these random spots that things over on the right are flickering and changing and so forth. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. I want to show you one other way to put breakpoints in your code without coming over here. So we go to our code here, and before we had a breakpoint on line 7, you'll recall. If I just put the word debugger right there in my code, that'll make a breakpoint right there, right? So I'm going to leave that there, refresh, and look what happened. It did the same thing as if I had a little blue flag there, right? It ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it stopped at 7. Now I can do the same thing I did before, where I click the little thing to go one line at a time, like that, or I can just continue the whole rest of the script, all right? So I'm going to take that out of there. Okay, now let's go back to doing a little flag right here. I'm just going to put a flag at the very beginning, and that way we can just step through every single line of the code. And you'll notice over here, it actually shows the breakpoints right here, right? You can see that there's a breakpoint on that heading. If I make another breakpoint, say here, it shows another breakpoint. So it shows you where the breakpoints are. We're just going to stick with one. We're going to refresh it. Now take a look over here underneath scope. You can see that it has BTN. Well, BTN's on line 6 right here, right? What this shows you is all of the variables in the script and what their value is at this moment in time, right? We've paused on line 1. Well, the BTN value is nothing. We don't have it yet. The value is not available. The form, which is on line 7, not available. Heading, not available. All these are just different variables here. Where's heading? That's the very first one that we're on. If I go to the next line, watch what happens over here. I'm going to click the little thing for next line. And now heading does have a value. What value is it? It's an H1. It's specifically this H1 right here. I just clicked on it and it brought me to here. Okay, it just went over to the Elements tab. I'm going to go back to Sources here, but when I clicked on that, it opened up the Elements tab and it showed me exactly where it is. All right, let's go to the next line. And now you can see, oh, when I did that, sub got a value of input. Again, looking there to see what the value is can be very useful if you're trying to hunt down some problem that's not working. And if you're not sure which input that is, because you might have more than one input, right? Click on it and it takes you there and it shows you, in fact, we do have more than one input, and it shows me specifically that it's this submit button right here, right? So go back to sources, and I'm going to walk through a couple here, 1, 2, 3, and you can see all these values are starting to fill in here, right? Keep going, And let's go one more, and then that'll give us the form there, and there we go. So now that we're on line 9 here, we've gotten past all these declarations and we can see all of the values here. So again, that can be very useful. So the last piece we're going to look at here is the call stack. Now the call stack is all about function calls, and we don't have any functions in this little note application. So I'm going to just paste in some other code here, right there. Now I've just dumped the script right in here in the body just to make it easy for me copying and pasting stuff in here. I would not do this in a real actual application, but just for the simplicity of this demo here. All right, so let's just undo that, refresh, and now we have this new file here completely, right? And notice the structure is a little different. We just have our index here, and inside the index is the JavaScript here. All right, so I've got a debug line right here on this multiply function. So we're just going to run the values here. We're going to calculate the area of a rectangle or whatever. When I click calculate area, it's going to run through the functions, and then we're going to see some stuff happening in the call stack, right? So again, we have a debugger right there on line 41. That's where it's going to stop. Okay, so let's click that, and it paused right there on line 41. And now we can look here, a couple of things. We have some variables. We have A is equal to 5. We see that value. B is equal to 10, right? And those are variables we got from here, width and height. But look at this call stack. These are different functions, and it tells you what line it is. Multiply is the function we're in right now. And you can see that. That's where we pause on line 41. Well, how did we get to multiply? Well, the calculate area function, the one right below it, called multiply. And you can see that. Calculate area calls multiply. Now, this is a very convoluted thing here. This is not that great of an app. I did this just so we'd have a bunch of functions calling functions calling functions so we could look at the call stack. Okay, so how do we get to multiply? Well, calculate area called it. Well, how did we get to calculate area? Well, process dimensions called that. And if we scroll over here, it tells us it's on line 23. So there it is. Line 23 called calculate area. That is the process dimensions function. Okay, well, how did we get to process dimensions? Well, the start calculation function called it. And so here it is. You can see the start calculation function on line 17 called the process dimensions, right? And then, well, how did the start calculation function happen? Well, that was from an on-click. Okay. The on-click happened on line 10. And sure enough, there's a button with an on-click right there that says start calculation. And so it goes backwards, right? If you start at the bottom, then you can work your way to the top. And the top is where we are right now. It's the latest thing. That's why it's a stack. You put each new thing on top of the stack. It's like your pile of papers on your desk, right? All the new stuff gets thrown on top, right? So that's what's going on here. So this can help you trace and find what's going on. How did I end up in this function? I'm sure you've had that problem before where you're like, wait, how did I get here? And what's the variable value at this point of the function, right? So the scope here and the call stack, those can be very, very useful when using the debugger, right? So that's all we're going to look at in the debugger. But now you know that it exists and you know where it is, right? It's under sources there, and you can go in there and put little breakpoints in your code by typing the word debugger or just clicking on the numbers here to put breakpoints. And now you know a couple little things you can do with it. The scope, you can look at the variables as you step through it. You can skip between breakpoints. You can do one line at a time. You can look at the call stack and see how you ended up in what function that you're in. The rest of it, it's your rabbit hole. Go down it, look, dig, and become a master of it. And this one, the debugger, more than any of these other things we're looking at here, it really could be a full course. There's just so much stuff you could do with it. And to become an expert at using the debugger takes a lot of work and a lot of practice. And the bigger your project is, the more useful it can be, for sure. For all the small stuff that we do in class, most of that stuff can relatively easily be done with our little thing where we're consoling stuff out or whatever. But I'll give you this challenge. Next time you have some issue where you are tempted to comment out a line of code or to console something out, try using the debugger and just see where it takes you. If it gets too messy and convoluted and it's messing you up, then just go back to doing it the other way. But give it a try. All right, that's it for the debugger.